Welcome to the Athlete's Compass podcast. Join us each week as sports scientist and founder of Athletica AI, Dr. Paul Larson, athlete, coach, and sports scientist Mariana Rakai, coach and cyclist Paul Worlowski, and everyday athletes discuss training, racing, and improving health and fitness. Get ready for your journey to peak performance. Hello and welcome to the Athlete's Compass, where we navigate training, fitness, and health for everyday athletes. Today is the second of three podcasts where we are talking about high-intensity interval training, or HIIT. If you haven't listened to the first one from last week, start there as the prof, Dr. Paul Larson, explained the science behind HIIT and how we can use HIIT to improve our cycling and running performance. So today we're dealing with just listener questions that came up on our forum and on our Instagram and social media. So our first question comes from Jesse on the forum. I am very interested in phenotype and ideal VO2 max intervals. As I recall, fast twitch types tend to benefit from long HIIT rather than short HIIT. So Paul, is there a prescription for HIIT based on phenotypes or sports? For example, should crit racers be doing different HIIT than Ironman triathletes?
Hey, Jesse, those are good questions, bro. And absolutely. This is such an interesting topic, and it's something I think that not everyone really appreciates. And I check out the different forums and stuff that are out there, and some of the ones that are much more popular than ours at this point in the time. One of them is Trainer Road. There's a big thread on Trainer Road with respect to looking at just looking at prescription individually based on FTP, and that you really see it right there. So even if you're going to prescribe your training on, say it was 120% of FTP or 105% of FTP. Like, these are when you get above your threshold, let's just call it your threshold, things are so individual. And they're so individual, just to your point, Jesse, because there's different phenotypes that are out there. We've got our twitchy athletes, our sprinters, and we've got our diesel athletes, those that can go and go and go. Both can perform exercise very high intensity, but they have different fatiguing properties. Let's just think about the fast twitch muscle fiber versus the slow twitch muscle fiber. The fast twitch muscle fiber is large, it's very powerful, but it fatigues really quickly. Conversely, the slow twitch muscle fiber, it's not that powerful. It's good, but it's not, super explosive and sprinty. But it goes and goes and goes, right? Like diesel gas, it just doesn't fatigue resistant. And then of course there's the hybrid. There's everything sort of in the middle of that. And that's how we are. This is what makes every person an individual. And, how can you test that in yourself? Well, you can a lot of us just kind of know what we are because of our own experimentation, right? We know if we're powerful and explosive relative to others, right? Like say when you're going through high school and you could easily slam dunk a basketball, right? Or whatever, or sprint and all these sorts of things, you're probably kind of a pretty twitchy phenotype. Conversely, if you were really good at long distance running, or you could go and go and go all day, you were probably more of like a diesel. And then kind of goes back to Jesse's question. Well, how do you take whatever you might be and put that into a HIIT prescription for an ideal prescription? And it's actually it's opposite what you mentioned, Jesse, where it's the fast twitch types. They tend to actually be better on the short intervals. Why is that? Because remember when we talked about the fast twitch, they fatigue quickly, right? They're powerful, but they fatigue quickly. So we don't want them to fatigue, because otherwise they'll they're not going to be able to do a great long HIIT workout. And we want to continue to engage that fast twitch muscle fiber. So to do that, the short interval is the solution for the fast twitchy person. And so they really thrive on short intervals. If you're fast twitch, and if you are a coach out there or you're an athlete yourself, that's the one that you should probably gravitate to more than others. We've got a great blog on the HIIT Science website from Bent Rolstead, Nikki Almquist, I believe, as well. Couple Scandinavians doing great research, and they basically showed that short intervals, you get more bang for buck with the short intervals. And when they did long intervals versus short intervals in these cyclists, top cyclists, they got better power outputs, like in terms of adapting to them. They didn't fatigue as much. They could do more work, and they compared 30-15s, I believe, versus like 4-minute efforts. And you'd think 4-minute efforts, classic VO2 max workout, and it was the opposite. It was the short intervals that the majority of them. Of course, it's a group finding, but even in a group of well-trained elite cyclists, the short intervals were generally a better formula, which is why you'll see so many of these in Athletica. We know the research. We're a science-based company. And even though we get some complaints sometimes that, well, you're always giving us short intervals, well, there's a reason behind that, right? We want to generally please the majority. And then, of course, keep in mind you can always swap that up with Workout Wizard and etc. So I think that's probably a good start for me. Maybe Mariana has some things to add.
Yeah, I think a lot of people wonder if they kind of have an idea of what they are, if they are fast twitch or slow twitch. Do we work on our weakness or our strength? Like, I would argue that. So I would argue I was or like more of a fast twitch in my youth, but as I've trained for Ironman and long distance, I've kind of converted some of my fast twitch to more of a hybrid phenotype. So, and I love the 30-30s or 40-20s because it feels like it's not so draining as longer intervals. Like if I did 30-30s, I would always do those longer ones, and I was just so tanked all the time. So one of the benefits of doing 30-30s is if you're fast twitch or hybrid, that you don't get so tanked and you recover from the session. But now, do I, as a hybrid, and I know that those longer intervals are harder for me, do I want to work on those more to become better at those? And I'm sure that it goes both ways. Like for those slow twitch athletes, they're wondering, should I do those really, really hard, high power or high speed 30-30s instead of lowering the intensity a little bit and to go longer, which is their strength. Thoughts?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, $1 million question. We don't totally ever know for sure, but when we go back to a bit of science, I think we mentioned this on one of the podcasts before, but if you don't kind of get to switch your phenotype around too much, right? There was a concept of hypertrophy, which is gaining larger muscle fibers, versus hyperplasia, gaining more fibers. Hyperplasia only works when you're a kid, when you're really, really young, right out of the womb. And so yeah, you can't really switch your fiber type around too much. You can take your already given fast twitch fibers and you can make them more slow twitch, right? You can make them more fatigue resistant, but you can't like really switch and start making more slow twitch fibers per se and these sorts of things, right? So yeah, that's so with that said, you're given what you're given. So if you are what you are, then what are you gonna kind of do, right? So you can't so if you've got all those fast twitch fibers, you can, again, you can make them more fatigue resistant, but you're not gonna, or same with the slow, like let's take, if you're a slow twitch person, you're never gonna probably have fast twitch fibers, right? Say you're a 90-20, right? You've only been given 10% fast twitch fibers. You're probably not ever gonna turn into a sprinting kind of athlete. So this is what you are. Take your blessed slow twitch diesel engine, makeup, and really get the most out of it. And you probably can, if you are a 90-20. There's not many out there, but if you are like a 90-10, you probably can handle long intervals quite well, and they probably don't tax you too much. So get in and enjoy them. So I think that is the question. Like the question was, do I work on my strength versus my weakness? I think you got to go to what your strength is, and just continue to embrace your strength.
All right, Mariano, do you want to do the next question?
Our next listener question comes from Anton Gonzalez 17 from Athletica Forum. How can I get neuromuscular response from short intervals? Type 2 intervals are aerobic and type 4 is aerobic, but with a neuromuscular load. This is really specific physiological response question. Paul, can you explain the different types of intervals our listener is referring to?
Yeah, so this sounds like our listener is a big fan of HIIT science, and I don't want to go too deep into the weeds for our Athlete Compass listeners necessarily, but basically we can get an aerobic, an anaerobic, and a neuromuscular response from any type of HIIT session, and you get different degrees of these three key physiological responses depending on how you skin the cat with your training. So, and Martin and I, in our HIIT science book, we tend to actually have like these types, right? So the listener is referring to type 2 intervals. Type 2 intervals have an aerobic and a neuromuscular response. The listener is also referring to type 4, and those ones have aerobic, neuromuscular, and anaerobic response. And so how do you get this neuromuscular response? Well, remember what neuromuscular, when we're talking about a neuromuscular response to a HIIT workout, we're talking about things like muscle recruitment, maximal recruitment, things like we just talked about in the short intervals, right? So big punchy responses. We're talking about things that would probably induce muscle soreness, so running is a way to always get that neuromuscular response to get either a type 2 or a type 4 kind of HIIT. So that's how you get a neuromuscular response from short intervals. The other way you could do it is you can alter the cadence. So when you alter your cadence, making it either fat, like super high RPM, or super low RPM, right? You're putting the neuromuscular system outside of its comfort zone, and that is how you induce a neuromuscular response. Do something a little different in terms of what the neuromuscular response is used to doing, and then you force that system to adapt. And I was I was having a thought about this as I was riding the other day. I was doing, so in my context, I'm coming out of Revelstoke, the snow is melting, and I'm on my bike now. And because it's, spring is in the air, and I'm starting to ride longer. And nothing huge, but say I've taken my long ride from a 45-minute long ride outside to now an hour and a half outside. And even just that 45-minute low intensity ride, I can even feel in my hamstrings and whatnot riding just that little bit extra long than I have in the past. And when I felt that little twinge, it was very minor, but a little bit of a twinge. I also looked on my Athletica profile. I saw my workout reserve was minus 29 or whatever. So it's clearly like a new stimulus. Well, I felt something there, and I loved that whole process of knowing that I got a neuromuscular response and then knowing that I'm adapting to that. And lovely to have the analytics on board. Again, thank you, Andrea, for creating your amazing workout reserve tool. So yeah, that was pretty cool. But anytime you're doing something that's you're not used to in terms of how your muscles move and recruit, that's a neuromuscular response.
Why would you want a neuromuscular response? When and why?
Well, why do I want to go longer, right? I better, if I'm an endurance athlete, I better sure as heck get my longer ride over 45 minutes, right? I need to adapt my body, and I need to adapt my neuromuscular system. So, and it's whatever I want to do, right? If my task is to sprint, I'd better give myself a neuromuscular response to do that. I'm trying to train it. I'm trying to make it adapt. So anytime I want to make my system adapt, I need to give it a neuromuscular response so it adapts and is stronger the next time.
And that comes through either going a little longer or doing something a little bit differently, harder, in order to elicit that neuromuscular response. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's a coordination. So I want my muscles to be coordinated so that they so that they can elicit a certain power output or movement pattern to make me push more power or move faster.
I have an athlete who is doing one of those epic downhill marathons with their big downhill portion in the beginning of the marathon, and then it flattens out. So for her to be prepared for this marathon that is coming up, she needed to do downhill running, right? So that she gets that neuromuscular load. Ouch, yeah. But think if she didn't in her practice and then she goes and runs this, that would be even more ouchy, right? Another example, me who lives in a flat area, when I go somewhere with hills or mountains, I'm gonna struggle because I don't have that load day in, day out as Paul has in your hostel, like big mountains everywhere. So when I choose my races, I would be better, choosing flat races instead of going somewhere. Ironman Canada, for example, which is very hilly.
That's right. And then this is where we can also get quite clever with our programming as well to elicit that neuromuscular response. You see the gym in the back, right? Like we can start really thinking about the ways that that we can use the gym to get that neuromuscular response, right? Eccentric contractions, weighted eccentric contractions, jumping off a box to a landing. All these various different means to develop resiliency in the neuromuscular system. So it's so that that downhill running isn't as debilitating ultimately, right? Because that could be a clear pinch point for that athlete in terms of their success or failure in that event.
Yeah, and another thing that just popped in my mind was after you're injured or when you're injured, you want to lessen the neuromuscular load. So walk runs, then running on grass, running in the pool, elliptical. You can do your HIIT sessions uphill because that's a lesser neuromuscular load than if you go and bang it out on the track with your kids.
100%. Yep. We can increase or decrease the neuromuscular response in all of these different ways. And it's up to us as athletes and practitioners to learn about the levers that we can pull on the neuromuscular variable to get the right stimulus. It's again, I'm reflecting on the great Laurent Vidal. It was an incredible coach and athlete that I got to spend time with in the New Zealand program. And he said, Paul, really it's all about optimizing the stress in an athlete in any given time. And he's right. And it's like, and and the neuromuscular stress, or the neuromuscular response is a stress on your body. And it's about getting that stress just right and building it up slowly over time, in accordance with what it's ready for.
I love these questions. So keep them coming. Listeners, please put them on our forum, put them on our social medias. They're so valuable. And our last question today comes from Old and Fast. That's clearly not me. Old and Slow. The question is this: I'm very curious about the reasoning and evidence behind a threshold workout in my Athletica program every week. Mariana and I both go, yeah, we know exactly what these are. These are the 4-minute intervals at 107% of FTP with 2 minutes rest. It's a pretty hardcore way to work threshold that contrasts with the traditional 100% or slightly below FTP of 10 to 20 minute intervals. Could the prof, Dr. Larson, talk about this workout 4 months for my event and the trade-offs in terms of gains and building fatigue? So not only are these 30-30s a consistent Athletica HIIT workout, but so are these 4-minute thresholds. What is the value of doing these shorter sessions at a higher percentage of FTP rather than 10 to 20 minute sessions at a lower FTP?
Yeah. So as we often say, Paul, lots of ways to skin a cat. I know, and it's not to say that one method is better than the other one. I know exactly the trainer road forum thread that you're referring to, and yeah, man, it's and again, you'll sort of hear the different opinions that are on there. This is one that's just, it's if I'm honest, it comes from a lot of these that I've done with my mate Dan Plews, and they're a little bit higher, so they're closer usually towards your VO2. Same problem that we spoke about earlier with Jesse's question, though, right? Where we're looking at, they're going to be individual depending on your phenotype, but they're just they're still sort of towards VO2 and above threshold. That's kind of the spot that they're in. So there's not a huge influence on phenotype because they are sort of just above your. We're calling it critical power now, not FTP. But yeah, they're just they're fantastic workouts that you can usually, they're not too fatiguing, but they're beauties if you can build upon appropriately. And again, I'm reflecting on the conversation that we've had with this one off air, Old, and I'll share it with everyone. And it's really, I've been following his progression on these, and they're beautiful. And he's making massive gains because whether it's Athletica or him himself, but what I notice when I'm looking at Workout Reserve is that Workout Reserve hits every time just nicely, just step cases down, and Old is done with these when it hits about 0 every time. And that means that his body and mind is ready for these every time, right? So it's like and I think a lot of the misconception that we get from these types of workouts, where people say, "Oh, why aren't you doing it this way?" Because it's with these should really be done at threshold and stuff. Or how many more of these should I do? Should I do 8? Should I do 6? Should I do 10? It's always individual. It depends on what you're used to, and if it's prescribed relative to you, you can skin it any way you want, but make it individual, and use Workout Reserve because it takes your profile into account. And that could be, remember, it's your profile on the sprinty, the short stuff versus your profile on the long stuff. And yeah, that's sort of my thoughts on this. This is just one excellent way to hit. I actually wouldn't call it it's kind of a cross between FTP or critical power, and your VO2 max. It's sort of in that little spot. So you're getting some excellent cardiac remodeling. You're probably recruiting the upper end of your fast twitch muscle fibers. And for a cyclist like yourself, Old, that's probably what you want to perform well in as an all-rounder, a gravel biker, and all the things that I know you do, mate.
That's perfect. So how often, those are usually programmed once a week into Athletica with 30-30s. Is that a pretty good mix generally?
Yep, absolutely. So yeah, kind of separated, but in a 30-30 at one side of the week, and then a sort of a 4-minute workout on the other side of the week, kind of like what we just described here. It's, for a cyclist, that's a pretty nice way to hit a lot of the targets that we're after. And maybe the 30-30 might be a little bit more forgiving in terms of its recovery profile. We've spoken about myoglobin. It lowers the sympathetic load. Probably recover a little bit quicker from it. But it's, again, nice to have this 4-minute workout as well. Again, very specific to the requirements of a cyclist. We know that we've spoken before. I think I talked about Teresa Adam, coaching her once, and she won the cycle race. It hits a pinch point often in terms of like you need to be able to punch on a hill or whatever for 4 minutes often, or even potentially longer, right? These are critical pinch points in a race, so you've got to have that covered.
So would you do this year round?
Yeah, I would. If you're in the build phase, absolutely. Yeah, like you want to keep stepping it up, right? So it's it's like, yes, with the exception maybe the off season. So in the off season, I would take it away and maybe no more. If I did a 4-minute in the off season, it would be very short, a low number of reps, hit the target very shortly or very quickly, and then moving on. But you can probably just get away with just 1:30:30 in the off season. But otherwise, yeah, it's part of it's a good signal to hit as you towards the end of the base phase, and certainly in the build phases.
Well, Old is going to keep getting faster if he does these, so that's good. That is all for this week. Thank you for listening, and join us next week for the Athletes Compass podcast. You can help us by asking these kind of questions, these training questions in the comments, liking and sharing the podcast, giving us 5-star reviews, and engaging with us on our social media. For Mariana Rakai and Dr. Paul Larson, I am Paul Worlowski, and this has been the Athletes Compass podcast. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Athletes Compass podcast, your North Star through the sometimes complicated world of training for your endurance sport. For a deeper dive into the science of endurance sports, listen to the Training Science podcast and check out the adaptive AI training platform, Athletica AI. And thanks.